spray it to get it to go dormant, hence the name dormant oil. You put a pretty good concentration on all the leaves and the bark and everything, and it'll cause all their leaves to drop off because it suffocates them. But it also puts a thin coat on the bark that keeps bugs from planting their eggs on the bark. And any of the eggs, specifically scale, they breathe through their shell, and you coat it with oil and it suffocates them. So you get a jump on spring pests, thrip, a bunch of other things that are laid on the bark without having to use a pesticide. So be careful what time of year you're using your oils. But some of the things that are triple action is one of the names of one of them that will be insecticide, a miticide, and a fungicide. And the mites are different than a lot of your insects, so that they take different care. But if you can, treat them with bacterias. Sometimes you just have to kill them. Sayonara is a really good one. Pyrethrin-based or pyrethrum-based insecticides are either extracted from or a generic compilation of stuff from chrysanthemum. And back in the old, Dalmatia is actually where the best chrysanthemum grows most toxic. And they would just make a powder of the flowers and carry it as like a poultice on their horses and stuff like that, and bang it on themselves, keep the fleas and ticks and stuff like that off of them. And we finally figured out what it was in there. Usually, if it has an M in the pyrethrum, then it's a direct extract. If it has an N, then it's a synthesized version of it, same molecular structure. So, and I'll get into molecular structures as soon as Johnny tells me we're good. Okay, so we'll do a little introduction. I'm Kevin. We're at Waters. We're going to talk about rejuvenating soils in your gardens and just in your yard. It's deeper, no pun intended, deeper than it appears. The subject goes into a lot of little different side rabbit trails. One of the ways that you can determine whether or not your soil is tired is how, of course, your plants respond to water is one of the easiest ones. If you water them and they don't perk up or they real, and you know that they didn't retain moisture. That's probably one of the easiest thing. Think a major, those are the vines that you see with little purple flowers. Sometimes they're called periwinkle because of the major is the bigger leaf, it'll climb trees. The minor stays low. The iris is another one. The reason I bring these up is these were common travelers. They were brought with settlers and stuff like that. You'll come across an old ruin and there's settlement, and it's highly likely there'll be some iris bulbs that are left there or some vinca somewhere around it. We used to affectionately call the vinca graveyard plants because some reason they planted them in graveyards. And if you come across, sometimes you'll find a little graveyard. When you buy an old house, you'll have an old bed, and there'll be some strange bulbs come up in the spring that you didn't know. Well, there once was a bed, and they decided to plant some spider lilies or something like that in there that you don't any other time except for when they bloom. So if you want to rejuvenate that soil or identify it, or just take a space and create it with the existing soil, that's what we're going to talk about, rejuvenating that soil, bringing life to the decomposed granite that we call dirt here, which happens to have a lot of really good mineral attributes. You just have to get the soil to release it and to hold moisture. And those are the tricks. There's I'll go into some of the science of it now so that you can think about it a little bit early. The native black walnut, for example, and our pine trees are notorious defenders of their territory. The black walnut does it two ways. It has chemicals that it excretes through its roots and through its leaves and through the husk of its fruit. These are toxins that will keep things from growing underneath them. so that they can capture all of the nutrients and all of the moisture. Pine needles, whether it's from a juniper needle or a pine tree, you'll see that where there's nothing growing underneath the pine trees, or maybe just a little bit of grass. And that's by nature's design to keep stuff growing. You don't want to rake up pine needles and put them in your garden as mulch, because that turpentine that's in those that are keeping other things from growing will keep your stuff from growing. You can put it in a mulch bin and let it decompose for a couple of years. Then it's fine. But directly from underneath the tree, no. The mesquite, a little bit lower elevation than us, but not so uncommon up here in some of the washes. A mesquite's actually a legume, and a legume will produce nitrogen. And it doesn't produce nitrogen. The true scientific explanation is there's a bacteria that creates a symbiotic. Cactus growers and stuff will come and take dirt when they're making their soil. They'll actually go underneath mesquite trees. If you're going to, say you have a shredder and you want to do some of your own wood chips in your yard, that's great. You buy an old place, and or you just fix a lot, you want to build a house on it, that stuff up 3 to 4 inches deep where you don't want anything to grow. And as that breaks down, that's actually cooking, and that will eat. It gets hot, it'll hold moisture in, so you'll set up a little bit of organic happen in there, get you some live soil. There will be some dry, rotten things that aren't good to plant to build a dam or to mix with the soil. People have their formulas. One guy was telling me about all of the sawdust he makes. I build furniture. He's a cabinet maker. Well, he's doing press board, which has got a bunch of odd chemicals for glues and stuff like that. I don't want in my tomatoes. Plus, it's a little bit hot, and you've got to let it break down. One of the tricks to that is nitrogen. You can throw fertilizer on it, and I, of course, recommend our 744 because it's a little bit lighter, and I'll get into that explanation in a minute. But if you don't add nitrogen to your compost, not your tomato cuttings and your banana peels and stuff like that, your wood chips and things, what'll happen is it'll pull nitrogen out of the soil to cause the breakdown to heat up, to cook itself, and then it will again release it when it's done. But in the interim, you can hurt your plants because it's pulling it out. Now it'll actually steam if you see this in the wintertime, but if you plant in it or mix it in your soil, then while it's breaking down, it'll cause some problems with your roots and stuff. Plus it'll be pulling nitrogen out of your plant. So determine that the soil's kind of tough or done, it's spent. Outline the bed. Just decide where you want it. Put chips down and just broadcast some general fertilizer on it to keep it from taking nitrogen out of the plants that are existing. But I use bone meal. When you look at these, you'll see it will relate to what it's going to produce. So without me having to go into too much detail, you have up, down, all around. That's how you can remember the three numbers. Up number is a root food that the side effect is flowers. So when you feed into that, some of your tired soils, you're like, well, I've got these beautiful big Gaura and beautiful big Salvia, but I'm not getting any flower. Anything against Peters. It's a fine product. It's got a lot of salt in it, but um, it's usually 20, 20, 20. Well, you're getting the plant to grow so big, cut back on the nitrogen, and feed it some phosphate, some of the flowering food. Treat it like a blooming plant, peaches and stuff like that. You got to get it to bloom before you're going to get your fruit. But be aware of what the reason I bring this up is this is organic stuff. This, except for too much of it, will create an environment friendly to a particular critter that's not good for your roots. Stuff. So you got to be before you start adding your chemical phosphate to your flowers. You can try and create this wonderful soil and set up a condition of your tomatoes, squash, bell peppers, most of your nightshade family. But when you'll see the bloom into the plant, it's called, where the blossom still is attached to the or fell off of the fruit, it creates a sore of so like that. But and your tomatoes, there's a Brix is the measurement of sugars suspended in your tomatoes. But if you're using the nitrate, it turns into nitrogen. So you can offset your fertilizing with that, knowing like goes nitrogen. The interesting thing about using these components is it sets up a cool ecosystem where instead of getting it from a particular source where they, like I spoke too briefly about the pyrethrin from chrysanthemum, you can get it from another source. And the most common source for them to molecularly match the structure of the chemical is from the oil and gas industry. Now, we should all have a little petroleum in our 501 or our 401, our retirement plan, but not in our tomatoes. So, I mean that quite sincerely. If you're going to eat a vitamin C, it's better acerola based or rose hip based with the bioflavonoids from the plant than a duplicate structure from chemical waste, which is essentially what it is. So just be very careful about where you're getting some of these. Your relationships with what you plant. All right, there's nicotine, for example, is in the nightshade family, tobacco. Nicotine in itself, great mental stimulant, you know, good for you on several different levels. The smoke is what hurts your lungs, not the nicotine, right? Some of the grub killers are nicotine based. Heavy nicotine's very toxic and you'll kill grubs, but you'll also kill your worms and your beneficial nematodes and all the other, and where they come from. So you find a bed, shore it up, make sure that you can get all the way to the ground. I'm not a big fan of land, and you want to be using soil because of its good mineral content. So if I find a bed, I'm going to go in, and then you can make amendments via that, or you can come in and bring a sample in and let them test it. And the reason I'm advocating that is that way you know what to add as per these points. You don't want to be adding something that you already have too much of. Or that you're going to mulch or potting soils that already have a bunch of fertilizers in them. Because once you start having problems, you don't know what it was eating. You know, am I nitrogen deficient, or am I phosphate deficient? You know, what's going on? You bought something that's got a mix in it, and it's more likely than not not organic, which I'll touch on again in a minute. If you just want to put a topper on it, put an inch or two of mulch. Not mostly sand with a little bit of the real thin, dusty part. That'll add significant to your vegetable bed. The problem just too light. So I would want to add some sand to it. And the easiest way to add sand is to Home Depot, or, you know, that too clean, right? That's not going to it'll give you the soil quality you want, but a good living soil. And that's what you're trying to do, is kind of stay away from too much chemical, because then the worms don't like it. You don't have the a living soil. So you monitor them, give them a good drink, see what they do, if they produce fruit or whatever. Or you just say, well, then just start bringing in some good soil. You're going to want some mulch. Manure is going to be a little bit higher in nitrogen, so be a little bit careful with that. But essentially is the granite more decomposed. As it decomposes, it'll come to almost a dust like, and will bounce on it until you break through, and then you're back down in the sand. That's that clay or that dust with the calcium out of the hard water, like a pot without a hole in it. You'll have a pan holding water, and you'll set up for that. That's an easy one to spot, because your soil will stink. You can dig around in there and you'll actually be able to smell the rot. Acid is your friend here. The water's out of balance, and the dirt's out of balance. So this is actually referred to as a soil stimulator, because in its granular state, you can buy humic acid in liquid, but in its granular state, it sets up for living soils. It sets up some bioreactions in the dirt, organisms and enzymes and stuff like that will set up for good soil. This will break apart the clay. Energy in the clay is when your molecules are all held together, and because of the hardness of the water and some other things, they lock up and they can't release that food. So you have a plant that's sitting in his pH is out of whack because you're giving him water out of your spigot or even out of your well, which is going to be high in calcium, and the pH is going to be out of whack. And so he's not healthy enough to take up the nutrients that are not being released. So you have like this double whammy. And the acid this is like taking baking soda before you go to bed. That'll balance out the pH of your body. You'll be able to suck up your nutrients better that you're feeding yourself. It'll blow apart the molecular structure of the soil so that that energy is then released and the plant can now take it up. So I will buy a bag of acid, humic acid, every year and put it on everything in my yard and you will be amazed. It'll be like you fertilize it. You can put it down when you put your fertilizer because it's not going to burn. And it's really hard to go wrong with that in Arizona altogether, unless you're planting in the forest in Flag where you got, a 1.5 foot of mulch. That's where humic comes from, is inside of the mulch. So this is essentially freeze-dried, compacted mulch, high acid. Great stuff. What you're going to want is to pay attention to what as we kind of touched on a little bit, if your plant exudes toxins or nutrients from its root systems. Much like some of the trees, they can be beneficial. They can set up a nitrogen-friendly environment, or they can set up a toxic environment where they don't want other things to grow. You'll see, fields of, you'll just come across a meadow and it's got the grass, what's the name of it? I don't know. There's a range grass up there in the high plains that is like 4 times the protein, gray grama. At any rate, it's wonderful for grazing animals because of the protein content. Well, it doesn't like anything else to grow around it. So you have to be really careful. If you start getting grass in your garden, it might be the one that doesn't want, it might have, or puts out nitrogen. Have you ever tried to get rid of clover, which you brought it in? It's a labor of love. Right? So while the field sits dormant, and they're going to come back with Roundup before they plant anyway, it's a very different world. In your garden, you can plant peas. Peas will lock up the nitrogen, and you cut them off, the root system dies. Instead of pulling it up, you can work sure where you're getting your information from. And that's another little rabbit trail I want to touch on. And then they'll go online and they'll blend what I've suggested with what they find. And they'll come. There's an encyclopedia of soil science that's put out by the universities that covers most of Arizona and parts. Non-scientific about what we do in this industry is if it's working for you, please try and make note of what's working in your yard. Keep doing what is working in your yard, right? So you've come in, you found your garden space, you're starting plants that will put some good nutrients into the soils. I see one that's in bloom here now. It's called Vitex. Chemicals forget the actual name of them, but they're too long for the class anyway. And then the Vitex is planted next to donkey sheds. Your burrow, because the enzyme keep fleas, they decompose the ground. The leaves are really, really good. It's called a chase tree. Because monk pepper, monk seed, and you grind it, and it is your like secret ingredient for your chili or your soup. It's really, it's strong. So be careful. That brought it with them on all their travels across the country. But the medicinal properties to some of these plants work. You could actually plant a tree that is keeping your fruits and vegetables and your flowers from growing because of the leaves that are falling off of it. And the roots that are running into some bone meal because you want some calcium and you want some other things. Well, be aware that you're going to end up with a spike of phosphate. So you don't want to throw a bunch of bone meal on some Miracle Grow mulch that's got 20 in it. So just be careful about how you're treating your soils and what you're getting out of it. Look at some of this of your toxins. This is in a stronger form. This will kill your grubs. And June bug is a grub that will come out in June and July. It's while it's a grub, it's this little inch-long, white, nasty-looking thing that just eats as it gets closer to the surface, he's just eating fresh roots. So you'll see patches in your lawn or just dead plants. Like you'll have a really beautiful echinacea. Well, they don't really care for echinacea. That's toxic roots, but Rudbeckia, all of a sudden will just die. And when you pull it out, you do a little forensics on it, you'll find 3 or 4 drops in there. This is clean enough for vegetable gardens. So I will use this in my flower beds in case I decide, in case a tomato comes up, or I decided I want to plant a pepper in my flower bed because I want something blooming. I want some fruit. It gets watered more consistently than my raised bed or something. I'll use this as opposed to the heavy toxins. Left behind stuff. We could call it a few things, but left behind or excrement. You know, you've got barnyard manure. That one's a little bit deodorized. It deodorizes itself over time. You can go out in the field and pick it up if you want. Cows, steer, they have 5 stomachs. So as they're eating, they regurgitate the cud, they chew on it, the acids break it down. You're not going to be picking up a bunch of seeds as you would in horse manure that only has 1 stomach and their acid system isn't strong enough to, it'll pass seeds. And so you'll have something that's hot that could hurt your soil as well as have seeds in it. So you have to be careful about whether you're getting cow or horse. For those that want to do it themselves, just buy a bag of it and put a little layer on top and give it a little extra time, knowing that that's going to be higher in nitrogen. So the other thing, worms, we do have worms for sale, I confirm that, but the worm casings, this got a little sand in it, or clay dust, which has got a lot of energy ready to be released with the right acid. But as your worms work their way through the soil, they're eating stuff that you've left them via mulch or potato skins or whatever you're putting in the ground. And they're leaving behind not just an enzyme that is from their skin, but also in their excrement. And that enzyme sets up a living soil. So be careful that what you're trying to kill your grubs with isn't going to kill your worms. And if you want to jumpstart it, you can get wet worm casings. And the wet worm casings will usually have eggs in it. Or you can buy a bucket of worms. The little wrigglers are better than the great big ones, just for some destruction. But if you don't have the moisture and the food, then the worms are going to go elsewhere or die. They'll come up to the surface when it's wet, and then there won't be any place for them to go, and they'll just kind of bake in the soil. And a dead worm is just a different form of mulch, but you don't want to set that up as a habit. So when you're watering, you have oh, hello, bee. You have roots all the way to the bottom. Your water has to go that deep. Otherwise, you're keeping this part moist and this part dry. And when shock comes, like a couple of really hot, dry days with really strong wind, sound familiar? Then you go into a stress mode that is really hard to get out of. And how do you measure that? Well, you measure that a couple of different ways. You can get a moisture meter. One of the things that I like to use, part of the point is you have to keep moisture in your soil, and you have to keep it in that deep. So you have to have at least that deep of dirt, right? I use rebar on my deeper stuff and my trees. I get a small piece. It's a political season. There's plenty of rebar on the side of the road right now. But you run it in the hole. When you're digging your hole, you're going to dig it bigger than you need, right? And you're going to set that in there, and then you're going to mix your soil, your native soil, with some mulch and cover it up. When you come back in that window, you run your piece of rebar in there and pull it out and use it like you're baking, right? On those ridges, you'll be able to see, oh, it's standing in water. I must have a pan of clay on the bottom of it. Or it's wet on top, it's bone dry. I got to water it longer. So that's something you want. In that moisture, as long as you've got good drainage, then you'll be setting up a friendly ecosystem for not just your worms, but just the organisms that live in the soil. There was a trend several years ago to taking pond water and putting it in your reservoir and they were calling it living water, because you were putting the fungus directly in your creek bed soil and water directly, and you're using that to water the plants, which is great, but it's really hard to maintain. So just keep the soil relatively wet, water the whole bed. Don't just, the drip systems are great. I use them, but you're getting a localized water. So unless you put one on either side of this plant, you're just keeping them alive. There's a difference between survive and thrive. And that oftentimes just the water is that difference. So if you've identified the space, then you can deep soak every once in a while, even though the sprinkler's going off. Rain, I got an inch measurable the other day. That's great. It was pure dust, an inch or two below the surface in my bed. I still, my neighbors think I'm nuts because I'm out there watering while it's raining. But that's perfect balanced pH, with a little extra moisture in my hose. I go overboard. I'll incorporate cherries and peaches and different fruiting trees into my landscape as landscape plants. So if you're gonna, rather than a flowering pear, I'd just soon eat the pears, so it still flowers, right? But that's just kind of how I work it. So be careful about what you're adding. Make sure you're watering deeply and the whole bed periodically. You don't have to do it all the time. Pick your plants based on what they will help with on the rest of the plants. These cone flowers, these are hybridized. These have cone flower in them. Rudbeckia, Echinacea. The Echia is the Echinacea from that name. Coneflower is Echinacea. Echinacea's got all kinds of medicinal purposes. Those exuding things, those things that come out of the roots that affect the plants around them, have all kinds of medicinal properties to them if you can isolate them. That's why pharma is so interested in, well, this is not as healthy a root ball, but the Echinacea, Rudbeckia, Echinacea, these are great plants in your vegetable gardens. I don't advocate it if you have a raised bed because you just don't have that much root space. But in the ground, that's a great one. Another really beautiful flower that is going to lock up nitrogen is the lupine. The big lupine, the Texas bluebonnets, the wild lupines, those are a legume. And there's a process for non-legumes that lock up nitrogen, but it's slipped my mind. So you want to be aware of that. The other organism that you can bring in that will help you with your pests are beneficial nematodes. So not just buying worm casings or buying a bucket of worms. There's a guy named Willie's Worms at the farmer's market. When I built a new bed, I bought a couple thousand worms. I don't know how you could tell you got a couple thousand worms, but he assured me I got a couple thousand worms. So, or you just buy a small bucket from us, or the worm casings to jumpstart the process. The beneficial nematodes will usually come dry, either in a sponge or in a powder form, and they'll eat the larva from fleas, ticks, the bad nematodes that will affect your root system, fleas, or what's the other one? Fire ants. That's how I used to use it and use them in Texas. I worked with Texas A&M, and they eliminated fire ants in that country house. And it was just amazing, the stuff that would come back in nature when you put the right predator in. The yellow jackets will eat your caterpillars. They're the number one for the predator for the basket worms. You don't want a bunch of paper moths underneath your house when you have kids, but if you're paying attention to them and you can use it kind of selectively. Your ladybugs, great product to put out any time of the year that you can find them, because their little larvae look really kind of scary, but they'll get in the soil, they eat a bunch of aphids and stuff like that. They're really, really a great product. All of this, they're all pooping. The nematodes are eating things and dying and reproducing, and they're leaving this trail of wreckage that is actually building a living soil that's really healthy for your dirt. It'll speed up the process of creating a living soil. A dry rot in your mulch bin, the white fungus that is just tearing apart your fresh wood chips, isn't good in the hole with the tree. But 6 months from now, when it's completely wrecked and decomposed, that fresh wood chips, it's great to mix in with the soil, because now you've got some living organisms inside the dirt, which is really, really healthy. Sometimes when you find this bed and it's become too arid and you're looking for a way of bringing it about, when you find that vein of clay, that's, again, once you could just dig up chunks of it, beat it with a hammer and throw it around, and it'll just decompose with the acid that your mulch is creating or the acid that you've laid down. Marigolds, everybody's talked about, keeping the bugs away, keeping the deer away. They're a great product. And when I change out my flowers, more often than not, even my vegetables, I don't pull up the plant. I just cut it off at the base, because those roots have gone down in there. They've broken up the soil. They're going to rot. They're going to set up their own biosphere down there. It's going to help everything. So you'll see stumps especially in my garden, where I've left the bottom half of the plant, essentially the iceberg. I leave that to do its thing underneath there. 2 or 4 years in, I don't till. I just add. it'll sink, I'll dig into it, you know, when I'm planting. Um, Another thing I'd like to touch on when you're planting, because seeds, uh, say you plant too many sunflowers, will actually hurt other plants. Fine, 1 or 2 years in a row, but if you have a bed that you want the great big monster sunflowers, or just, you know, a bunch of the different colored ones, just rotate it, you know, move it to a different spot. Same thing with tomatoes, move them down. If you're doing a vegetable garden or even a flower garden, like an English garden where you just have, it doesn't look as orderly, you just got a bunch of cool flowering stuff in there, be careful with how you mix those plants. But you can also have little worm, they sell them as baskets, but you don't need to do that. You can have a rotating mulch bin in your beds. And the way that I used to do that when I had bigger gardens, I would dig what I refer to as a grave, and I would throw all my mulch in there, all my vegetable stuff out of the kitchen, my trimmings, anything that wasn't really sticky, I would throw in there. Once that was full, I would dig another grave by burying it, and that would just rotate around, and that stuff would just decompose. Well, what it does is it sets up a great worm haven, because that's what they like, is the fresh stuff. And there's a trend in that industry to sell you a basket with big holes in it. You bury that, you just put your potato skins and everything in it and cover it with dirt and make sure it stays wet. If you ever decide to go and pull that up, it's just got all the worms come in and they go back out, and they keep your worm population healthy by giving them something fresh to eat. So you can do that, or you can just decide, okay, this little pile I'm taking out of the sink and I'm going to go bury it over here, knowing that it's going to be hot for a little while. It's going to decompose faster and it's not going to be root friendly. So you have to be careful about where you plant for that. But don't forget your beneficial nematodes. Those are wonderful. Oils, be careful. So if you spray neem oil on your plants, those leaves are going to leave neem oil in the soil, which isn't all that great for, it'll take a lot to build up. So don't be too overly concerned about it. But I wouldn't spray my peach tree to cause it to drop its leaves, rake those up and put them in my vegetable garden. You follow me? Just be aware of it. And if you're not sure, come by, you know, set up. We do have, there is another service that is one that we offer, and it's for you to buy plants, obviously, but you spend, I think it's $250. You buy yourself a gift card, and then you pick somebody that will spend an hour and a half with you picking out your plants and going over some of this stuff. The $150 or the $250 goes to plants. None of it comes out of pocket, but it gives you the opportunity to have someone one-on-one here when you're picking out stuff, as opposed to trying to catch somebody and get your questions answered. You're going to spend that much. It doesn't have to be on plants. It can be on fertilizers and stuff like that. You don't need to spend it all at once. So I can't imagine the price of plants today not being able to spend that. But some of us are growing vegetables because of the economy of it, and some of us are growing vegetables just because I can't find a tomato that tastes like mine at the grocery store. Of course, now you're into whole food tomatoes because they end up costing $5 a piece by the time I get them out of my yard. But questions? Yes, sir.
So I've experienced after a rain.
Yep.
The flowers seem to enjoy that much more than out of a hose.
Yep. Yeah, after a rain, the flowers, all plants look a little bit better as opposed to hose water. Because of the soil and the caves that our reservoirs are in, you're getting hard. It's not as hard as some other places I've experienced in the United States, but you've got a lot of calcium, which locks up some of the minerals, plus the pH is out of whack, whether it's out of your faucet or out of your well. It needs acid. Coming out of the sky, it's perfect. and it's clean. So no chlorine or anything else to it. It's very clean. So you can. That's why I water oftentimes while it's raining, if there's no lightning, because I'm getting that you there's nothing like, even when you wash the dirt off of the leaves with your hose, you're still leaving behind calcium, and there's a certain amount of chlorine and stuff like that in it to make it city safe. So you can run gray water. I haven't seen as many aeration systems here, but if you're on a septic, you could set aside a float, and you'll chemically treat the water, and you can broadcast it on a field. You can water trees and stuff like that with it, and the solids are set aside. Another kind of fun fact with your mulch bins, there's a product that you put in your septic tank called Ridix. And what I would do is I would take great big piles of wood chips and sawdust from a mesquite factory I used to work with, and just pile it real high, get it wet, crack a box of Ridix over it, rinse it in. It's for eating the solids. It's an enzyme for eating the solids in your septic tank. And in short order, it would decompose this stuff. And so instead of waiting till next year, 6 months from now, I'm putting that in my beds. But there's ways of working with the enzymes. Yes, sir.
Is the soil tester reusable, or are there cards? Like, I want to test our raised bed garden and a couple of our fruit trees that are not doing good.
Well, yeah, I don't know if the actual piece is, but there's several in here. So you bringing in the dirt, then, and if it's a raised bed, it's a little easier. I can't tell you how many times we've tested soil, and what we're doing was we're testing soil out of the bag instead of testing your native soil to decide what you're supposed to do with it. So
I don't know where they got the soil. When they brought it in, we have a raised bed. It's like dirt filled on.
yeah,
So I don't know if the sample at one end was going to represent the sample at the other end. And we have a couple of fruit trees that are not really from the same place.
yeah,
So,
yeah. I would deep water on your fruit trees. Get some acid on them. Where's your house?
Granville in Prescott Valley.
Okay, yeah, that's notorious for veins of clay. So you're going to want some acid, almost certainly. But you got to go deep enough to get to native soil. When they scrape these neighborhoods, here you only have organic material in the very top layer, and then after they scrape it, it's kind of regurgitated, if you will. They take a pile from here and they make it flat on your yard, and then they take a pile from there, and it's very difficult to get a consistent reading.
Yeah,
So
they replaced one of the trees with the same thing.
yeah,
Didn't look that good when they put it in.
well, and so you have to make a habit of doing forensics in your hole. So when you pull that tree out, you want to actually smell the dirt, pull some of it out and smell it, because you will have these pans of clay and of caliche, which is essentially pottery, and you'll have standing water. It'll be like putting them in a pot without a hole, and they'll just rot.
Yeah,
Oh.
we didn't know if we're overwatering or underwatering.
Yeah. And get yourself a piece of rebar. The moisture meters aren't really long enough. You can find, I think we may have some long ones in there, but they're more for pots than they are for in the yard.
So you want to go like a down there more?
Yeah. You get a thin one, so it's easier to get in, and you can actually use the same hole. And once you identify, like I'm up on the backside of Glassford Hill, but I'm in Yavapai Hills. It's the same volcano. And my maple out front, dark green, beautiful fall. The one in the back looks yellow. doesn't really give me it's kind of pinkish burgundy, not really the big bang fall color. And we're talking, I put in, big trees. So what I did was, out from the tree, I pound a piece of rebar down as deep as the hole, and I rock it around. We're talking 5/8, and I use that to check. But I also put acid directly in there, so I'm getting acid at root level, and then I cover it with my grow mix, and I make sure that that's getting wet. Whenever it's raining, I'm over there with a hose, making sure where I know those deposits are of fertilizer and acid, and these greening up. You can just see it work its way through the veins. A brown leaf isn't going to turn green, but you can get a yellow leaf to go a little bit greener.
Is yellow a sign of overwater?
It can be overwatering. Is yellow a sign of overwatering? It can be over, it can be under. Crispy is yellow and crispy, or brown and crispy is too little, and flexible is too much. Yes.
I have a question. So I understand that our soil is alkaline and our water is alkaline.
Yeah. Yeah.
So are you saying this acid?
Humic acid. Yeah. So I will. Thank you. She's asking about sulfur for an acid is actually what sulfur is used for, and she has a sulfur allergy. So what would work as well? Well, to give you a complete answer, we carry gypsum because it's one of those things where I've always used it. My grandpa used it, and we always got great results. Don't talk me out of it. I'm going to use gypsum. Great. Please buy our gypsum. One of the reasons gypsum works is because as it's breaking down, looks like I was pointing out to some of these, as this breaks down, you're going to end up with nitrogen. Gypsum turns to sulfuric acid. So when it's breaking down, that's one of the reasons why it works, because once it gets to acid, it blows apart the molecular structure of the clay. That's why it's used so much, because it balances out the pH. It opens up the clay, releases the energy that the clay is holding on to, balance out the pH of the plant. That's why sulfur soil is one of the ironite, which is soil, it's got sulfur in it. Those are the reason why those work. This is humic acid. It is acid. Instead of waiting for it to break down to be acid, it's acid. That's why I use it. It's a quicker result. And in a granular form, it leaves behind biometric markers that set up your living soil. That's what the dark granulars are. I've used it in high heat areas. I had a 19-acre farm in the middle of Phoenix that we were growing a bunch of stuff for people. Basil for restaurants, peppers, whatever. And after we'd have a week of 120 degrees, I'd run liquid humic acid through the lines, and everything would just like jump out of the ground. I had carrots like this. It is playing the organic game, the best that you can. So, yes, there are ways around the sulfur, and that's the humic acid. Yes, ma'am. Yep. Yeah. Okay. So she's got mealy fly probably in her catmint, and how to get rid of it. And it's in a pot. It's in a container. So sometimes you got to throw the soil out, but you could try some beneficial nematode. It's a little bit of a small space for the expense, but it's probably worth it to throw the dirt out. You can put it someplace else out in the yard where it's not going to get moisture as long, because the white fly or whatever it is my guess, it needs the moisture in the soil for its eggs and everything else. And what they do is, this is one of the things that causes leaf curl on your plants. Are you familiar with the term keloid, where some people scar it heavier than others? The bugs will come up and they'll scrape your leaf, cause it to sap, and they'll eat that sap. And as the leaf heals, it keloids, it curves towards the scar. The plant might not be hurt, the leaf just looks ugly. You're not going to get it to grow flat again. But what you have is a soil infestation. The bug is living in the dirt. Yes. Yeah. But exactly. Yeah. Typically, the question is the leaf curl on roses. Typically, roses will have thrip and aphids. And the roses, because you're not going to eat them, you can actually treat them systemically, which means that a fertilizer that has a toxin in it that can be taken up into the plant and cause the plant to be toxic to the bugs. It's not going to kill the bug. It will just cause the bug to choose not to eat that rose. So you want to spray it anyway. So you kind of go at it with both sides. Spray it, but feed them phosphate. Roses need deep watering. As an aside, because I like roses, then I have to kind of throw my wife under the bus here a little bit. She won't water the way I ask her to water. So I will let her have a couple of plants that, it's not chauvinistic. She wants a white rose. I bought her a really nice white rose with the intent to put it in the ground later. I bought a red fireman's rose that's got this crazy smell to it. And I soak them, like let the water come out of the bottom, do it again, do it again, do it again. That's one watering, like 3 times. Phosphate, phosphate, phosphate. Root food, side effect flowers. When she'd water the top of it. Oh, it started coming out the bottom, that's enough, or whatever. Use Peters 20-20-20, big green plant, very few flowers. We went to move them. Mine's got roots all the way down to the bottom. I had to dig a hole the size of the pot. Hers, roots like that, alive and well, but wouldn't be able to stand, a heavy bug infestation, or it just doesn't have the fortitude to handle like the weather now, where it's 100 and the wind's blowing 20 miles an hour. It'll just zap your plant.
It's flower power and water good, because I use flower power.
Yeah.
Does that have other fertilizers in it as well?
Yes, the flower power, does flower power work for your containers in the water consistently? I'll go back to this guy. The term in the industry is called pushing. So you see all these beautiful flowers. What they do is they get the plant looking very vigorous, and then they up the phosphate, and it's in the drip system as a percentage of the water. Well, they increase that percentage, and as soon as they set all the flowers, then they send them to the nurseries to sell, because they sell better when they're full of flowers. Well, you could tell a plant's been pushed when the roots look like this. Phosphate, root food with the side effect of flowers. So yes, deep water, use your flower power. The flower power is like 10-48-8 or something. So it's got some of the other ingredients in it, but it's as much soluble phosphate as we could put in a formula and it's still dissolved. But yeah, you can, and the fun thing about it is use it on your veggies. I use the flower power on my tomatoes because no flowers, no fruit. So I just treat it like a daisy and I feed them every 2 weeks. But I also use flower power, and this is one of my little tricks for my garden. I will use flower power in the fall to put my peach trees to sleep, because the only time a root can work for itself on a perennial or a tree is during the wintertime. Otherwise, the whole time it's supporting the rest of the plant. So I give heavy phosphate in the fall so that its roots can work, and then it's residing in the tree for when spring comes, you get this big boom of flowers, more peaches, more cherries, more whatever.
Because of, I have a dwarf peach that's in a big pot.
Yeah.
And last year I got a ton of peaches, this year I have one.
Well, the weather, the pot size is important because when it's up in the air, the roots are, the question was, she has a dwarf peach in a big pot. And last year she got a bumper crop. This year she got one. Your roots can get cold from the ambient temperature. It's not in the ground. The containers oftentimes are subject to your grubs more, and they're going to be residing in the top 4 inches of the soil. So you can just go in a spot where they're not and dig around and see if you have grubs. But you have late colds that can knock off the blooms if you have an early. Some of those dwarfs are early blooming, and that's a problem too. The other, there is a flower. So this has got a systemic in it. The question for roses. This is the fertilizer I was referring to. So this is a rose food with a systemic. I wouldn't use it on my tomatoes, but certainly on your roses. The other phosphate that I'll use is superphosphate. It's a granular, and I will use that in the fall and in the spring, and that'll give me great blooms. You know, it's as long as you're a couple of months apart, you're not going to over phosphate them. But I phosphate in the fall, and on your fruit trees, size in the summer. So after you've lost your fruit, you're eating it. Bring down the center of it so that you can keep it to where you can get to it. Yes, ma'am.
And one side is blooming and healthy, and it is slowly dying on the other side.
The hibiscus, so, and it's in a pot. Wow. So, and that's up here. So she has a tropical hibiscus that is in the ground, and it's dying from like the inside out. Yeah. So part of it's not getting any leaves, and it's the disease is migrating. I would suspect that for one, it's very durable because they're not supposed to make it through the winter up here. But they're on the bark, you'll look for dark. There'll be some black that is moving over. I think you have a fungus, and I would check the soil, make sure it's not standing in water. There is a fungus that comes and goes, and there is a spray-on systemic fungicide that's bacteria-based, and it'll get into the system, but it doesn't hurt to put a couple of drops in a bucket of water and water it with that plus spray it. And but it literally is like a teaspoon per gallon or something. I mean, it's very minimal, but you're setting up, it's a bacteria, and you're setting it up in the soil to eat the bad bacteria. But to be able to have a tropical make it through the winter, there's a Mishudo hibiscus that will die to the ground and come back from its roots, but the tropicals aren't supposed to make it through our winter. Yeah. It's like the Ocotillo in Prescott Valley. Yes.
I've noticed over the last few years that various things are the bark is splitting, and roots are dying back, the types of the taking off, the days of
Yeah. So it's a very old Golden Delicious that's dying off in stages. And the problem with apples have a lifespan. So a lot of the ones that were up here originally don't have grafts. And so it's hard to tell what's your rootstock and what is the graft. But once you start trying to treat that, then I'm concerned I would probably just get another tree and plant it near it and do what you can with that one. Because first off, I don't use any of the black tar toxins when I'm cutting a fruit tree. I just use a spray paint that's the color of the bark. Some of your boring insects will go after fresh cuts. And so all you're trying to do is mask the smell of the cut, not put something on it that will actually kill them. Then you want to be using your dormant oil in the fall and in the spring. You want 2 applications of dormant oil. And anything that's left, you're going to hose it down. You're either going to put it on in something with an attachment like this, or put it in a pump-up sprayer. And there'll be neem oils, there'll be mineral oils. There's all kinds of things that make up dormant oils. But yeah, it'll suffocate the larva. But the issue with where you're at, the toxins that will kill the bugs it's not good for the fruit, and it's not good for the bees that are coming to your plant. On most of your fruit, like cherries, apples, peaches, the stem is the last filter. So it's very difficult to get a systemic toxin into the actual fruit. There's a lot of things that you can use out there to kill the bugs, but once it's in the tree, then it's on the flower that your bees are coming to. You set off this kind of domino effect of toxicity. So, yeah, but just don't use it in the summer. Yes. Yeah. Well, moisture will stick to the question is about how to use the rebar to check your moisture. And you run it into the zone between the root ball and the stuff that you've mixed with the native soil. You put it in that area down to the bottom of your hole. And you will be able to just look at it and see moisture on the ridges. It'll stick to it. You'll be able to tell if it's muddy in the bottom. You can actually smell the rot on the rebar. But my suspect is that if you have forsythia and it's crunchy leaves, it's not retaining the water. So you may have mixed, whoever planted it, put too much mulch with the native soil, and it's not, okay, I wasn't gonna go there. But the way around that is, get some sand out of the creek bed, maybe get a bag of topsoil and pour it around the base and water that, and you'll see the sand disappear and fill up the air pockets. And that will help give your roots a little blanket. You want sand, you want to be adding sand to that soil. Yeah, you're loving it to death. You put it in too perfect a soil. Yes, ma'am. Yep.
And I have 3 of them planted in an area, and 2 of them this year have lots of strange looking leaves.
Yep.
There's also a butterfly bush near it that's not really great either. So
Yeah, that's a fungus. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's a fungus, and spray it at night with a fungicide, or triple action will work, but you can't go too long on the triple action because it's got neem oil as one of the fungicides in it, and you don't want to do that during the summertime. Yep. You can put most of the fungicides that are for foliar for spraying, you could put a little bit in a bucket of water and pour it around the base as well. Yep. It's a systemic for bugs. Yeah. If you, the way you could do it is take one of the deformed pieces, cut it off, and slap it on a piece of white paper. And you'll be able to see the bugs. I use a microscope or if I'm at your house, I have a little magnifying glass in my pocket. But I can tell, I slap it on something that's a solid color, black or white, you can see if it's crawling around, then you've got a bug issue. Just spray at night and use sayonara. This is about as easy as it gets. When you get these, this is a concentrate. It's mixing in the valve, and instead of mixing it in a pump up spray, just hook it up to the hose, spray it down, take it off, put it back on the shelf. It's that simple. Well, I have there is a fungicide in there with this on it. Yeah. And it'll say systemic fungicide. Yes, sir. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, you bet. Just the holidays are a suggestion so that you feed quarterly. He's talking about the water suggestion of 4 holidays for your fertilizer. So yeah, just pick whatever you want. Pick today because that's when you buy it. Take it home and feed it. I don't like to store stuff. So I keep some of this stuff because I can't use it all. But I will buy, like I said, I'll buy the acid and I'll empty the bag. And then I might keep a little jar in case I buy something else to plant and I want to put it in the hole. But I'll buy my fertilizer. I will go and use it all. And then, I'll throw it around something and I'll hose it in to get it activated, start it breaking down, because your drip is very localized. If you put your fertilizer over here and your drip is here, this isn't going to make it. So you want to start dissolving it when you put it down. The acid you can mix with the fertilizer. We do it in the pots all the time. So you can put it down at the same time. But it's the date you pick, and then loosely quarterly. Organic is a term that's governed to almost out of existence. If you add a mineral, you can't call it organic. So you could use dolomite, oyster shell, calcium, and you wouldn't be able to call it organic. So, but the water's fertilizer is 744. A little different with the calcium in it for the fruits and veggies, but just make sure that when it's light like that and it's organic based, so it's not going to be a byproduct of the oil and gas industry that you're using. Miracle-Gro will give you the results. Miracle-Gro thinks we're mad at them, or you thought specifically I was mad at them, because I used to try and get them 10, 15 years ago to make something for Southern California, Arizona, our soil, because it's great product for Pennsylvania and Washington State. But especially doesn't like leaf feeding with a lot of calcium with the hard water. They're finally coming around and making some different, I think somebody else bought them, but they're coming around and they're making some other stuff that's a little bit better. But the chemical base and the perfectly balanced stuff that's high, like 10, 10, 10, 20, 20, 20, that's very difficult to chase a problem when you put that down, because the nitrogen's going to break down different than the phosphate. So you may have more phosphate and you come back with another balance. Now you've got twice as much phosphate as you need. You just have to be very careful. And when you're not sure, get your soil tested, buy yourself a gift card and ask one of us to spend some time with you. And it's just not, yeah. Yes, ma'am. You in the front.
Can you preventive spray for powdery mildew? Like if you had it on all of
Yep.
the roses,
Yep.
the next spring before you think it's going to happen, can you preventative spray for that?
Yes. So the question is preventive spraying for mildews, powdery mildew specifically. The powdery mildew is really bad on the red tip petunias as well, and some of the ligustrums and things. Once it gets started, it's difficult. So yes, I would. My roses, I take the dead wood out in the fall, when they go naked, and I will spray them with the dormant oils and the fungicides. I'll coat the barks with them in the fall. And as soon as they start to bud out, as soon as I see any sign of growth, because I don't want to put it on the leaf, I just want it on the wood. And yeah, you can. And then you can put fungicide, a systemic fungicide in the soil when you water, maybe twice a year. But yeah, you can. A strong plant is the best.
I have a pony palm that I've had in a pot on the patio for years and it's done great. But, would it be better to stay in the pot or go into the ground?
A ponytail palm to stay in a pot or in the ground. You have to be in a pot because it won't make it through winter here. And so you just need to step it up slowly. Like just get, because they don't like standing in moist soil.
Plant has gone, "Ooh, this totally
Yeah. You'll feel the stalk and you'll get there'll be a paper-esque crunch to it where you have the wood on the inside and the outside. That's a moisture problem. He's been too wet for a period of time. You might get some little sprouts that come out. But if it looks really bad, you can cut it off and put some wax on it to seal it and then watch it come out. But stop watering it for a little while. Yeah, you could use the 744 or something. It's going to, because it doesn't like it. If you plant them in the ground in the right climate, you plant them in almost pure sand because you don't, like a palm tree, you don't want them to hold water. So if you step it up, be very careful. Put it in the pot just a little bit bigger and don't water it for a little while. And just water it a little bit at a time and mostly sand. But soluble is the best way to feed that. You bet.
All right, I have a fertilizer predator in my backyard. And her name is Jilly.
Yes.
She likes the bone meal.
Yeah.
So I started putting it in water,
Yeah.
but it doesn't, of course, all dissolve.
Right. No, I have a rat terrier, same problem.
So what you do is liquid.
No, so her dog is going after her fertilizers, especially the organic ones, because they'll have chicken scat and bat guano and yummy stuff for dogs. Yeah. What I do is one of two ways. And every couple of years, I'll treat my yard this way, but I'll throw my, part my gravel a little bit, throw my fertilizer on, put some mulch on that and soak it. And then put my gravel back on it. And it's a lot of labor, but I'll do a tree or a set of shrubs at a time. And yeah, you got to start breaking it down. Yeah. Yeah.
So is there a liquid that you guys
I tell you what, the best liquid that we have is going to be called Root and Grow. Yeah. Yeah. It's like a carbohydrate for the soil. That's why with mesquite, there's a lot of sugar in the beans, and you can put those in your mulch bin, but you want to put them through your grinder first, so you just don't grow baby mesquite trees. But that carbohydrate will set up a really neat engine in the soil. Yeah. Yep. Yep. Calcium. Yeah. They're not inside, right? They're not in a greenhouse. No, cut the tops of them out to slow them down a little bit and quit giving them anything with nitrogen in them. Yeah. Yeah, what you want to do is cause it to stop because it's in a growth mode and it's forgetting to set fruit. And you could spray calcium, the fruit set and the calcium in the soil. That's what that does. But the calcium in the calcium nitrate will turn into nitrogen and it'll start growing again fast. But if you do a leaf application, then that's causing it to set still for a little bit. I would pitch the tops of the plants out. Well, you can, but that's going to cause them to bloom more, and that's just pure phosphate. So you could do that, or you could buy super phosphate and throw the granules around the base. The calcium is, it gets taken up in the nightshades and causes, it stops blossom end rot is what that's called. But if you don't have that problem because you don't have any fruit, so what you want to do is just slow the plant down. So either more direct sun, there's a chance that you've got a little elotation going on. If you have too much shade, then they're trying to get real tall, real quick to get more sun. And you can roll them out into more direct sun and cut the tops of them off a little bit. Yep. Just, yeah. Yeah, I would, making sure your soil has got enough mud to it, so it's not just all vermiculite too light. But yeah, sunshine. Yeah, tomatillos are in our nightshade, and you want to plant 3 or 4 of them, even though it'll say self-pollinating on there. You want 3 or 4, 5, 6. Thank you. Yeah. Well, that's it. All right, a couple more.
Thank you.